chapters, oh my goodness. This week has just been like face palm, face palm, face palm. One thing after another. Oh, hi, Mabby. Okay, so anyway, Freakonomics. And I did not intend on picking an orange shirt to match the book. That was a happy accident. So it is what it is. I'm a little bit late on this book. It came out in 2005. And this was given to me by my friend Lisa Dunton. It's one of her favorite books. So it took me a while to read it. She gave it to me probably about a year ago. And I didn't really... Okay, I'll hold on that. Okay, so anyway, Freakonomics. It has two authors. One is an actual economist, and then the other is an author. And they met because the author was interviewing the economist for the New York Times Magazine, and there was a big write-up and a big article. So pieces and parts of the article are like scattered throughout, like between chapters. So it's kind of cool to actually get to see some of the real article that was written. So that's how they met. And then they decided to write a book together. So the interesting thing about this book is that there's no unifying theme. So each chapter is like an entity in and of itself. There's nothing to tie the whole book together. Each chapter is totally different in its own entity. So I wrote down the chapters because their names are super interesting and I didn't want to forget them. So the first chapter is what do school teachers and sumo wrestlers have in common? And that one talks about incentives and how they're used to control behavior. So for example, standardized testing and federal funding. How does the federal funding control how standardized testing is working in the schools? And they talk about teachers cheating and things like that. And then they talk about sumo wrestling and cheating and corruption in sumo wrestling and how they play off of each other. So another chapter is how is the KKK like a group of real estate agents? I thought this chapter was super interesting. It gives a background of the KKK and the story of this guy, last name is Kennedy, and he has bloodlines of the KKK, like his whole family's involved, and then something happens in his life, and they talk about that, something happens in his life, and then he like totally changes course, and he speaks out about the like oppression and stuff like that. And then he actually joins one of the local KKK franchises because he wants to learn like how they operate. So, because at that time it wasn't, no one really knew like how they ran. So he learned all their secret passwords and all that stuff. So super interesting. It also talks about information asymmetry, which is like you accept the word or the truth of what someone tells you. So like there's always going to be an expert and then a non-expert. And whatever the expert tells you, you just automatically believe it because they know more information than you. So that's interesting. And that would lead to fear. So another chapter, why do drug dealers still live with their moms? There was a guy in Chicago that went and lived with a branch of the Black Disciples to learn how the gang was run. And he was not Black, so he stuck out like a sore thumb. And surprisingly, they had their own like bookkeeping system, and he learned all about that. So it talks about that, which is pretty interesting. And then it also talks about the use of cocaine and crack in the US, specifically how it impacted Black neighborhoods. Another chapter, where have all the criminals gone? It talks about so Romania, surprisingly, used to be one of the world's like leading proponents in abortion. So women had abortions regularly over there, and it was like a way of life. And then this guy comes along, their new leader, and bans abortions. And it talks about all the negative effects that it had on the country. And then like the uprising and all that happened. So pretty cool. And also in that chapter, it talks about the crime rate in the 90s. So this book was written in 2005, so some of the stats are old, but still relevant, I think. So it talks about the crime in the 90s. For example, in New York City, there used to be over 2,000 homicides a year. That's insane. And then it was basically like a drop of the hat. Homicides went down to like 500 a year. So there's all these researchers, all kinds of time trying to figure out why that happened. Was it policy? Was it leaders? Was it having more police? So Stephen and Stephen go through the top so many answers as to why crime rate dropped, and surprisingly, none of those are why crime rate dropped. So the next chapter is what makes a perfect parent. So it talks about why nature versus nurture, and if parents actually have an impact on how children turn out. So yeah. And then I think is there another chapter? I don't know, but there's another one called Perfect Parenting Part 2, and it talks about how people name their children. So there's a story about a guy named Winner, and then his brother was named Loser. And did their name have any impact on the success and outcomes of their life? There's also another story about a mom that named her child Temptress, and then something happened. The child ended up in court, and the judge was like, "Ma'am, why did you name your child this? Do you even know what it means?" Talks about that. And it also talks about naming trends, which is super interesting. It goes back and forth and talks about higher income names, middle class, and then lower income, and then the trends of those. Like some of the names come up again later, and sometimes some of them don't. So he actually predicted popular names that were going to be in 2015. Here's the list, and it's so fascinating. So we have, for most popular girls' names of 2015 with a question mark: Ainsley, Ava, Avery, Ella, Grace, Sophie. Those are just a few because, I mean, those are the popular names right now. And then boys' names: Aiden, Asher, Carter, Cooper, Jackson, Liam. I mean, that's not all of them, but so fascinating. I feel like I was just like mind blown at that. So those are the chapters. The book isn't too long. I think it's like 200 pages, but I mean, it reads pretty quickly. Yeah, it reads pretty quickly. I think some people won't like this because there is no unifying theme, and I think you will like it if you're into statistics and data and analysis and that kind of thing. And I'm not usually into that kind of thing, but all this stuff was like, I think stuff that is happening stuff we hear about in the news, like crime and drugs, and even interesting things like pop culture, like naming, and talks about some other weird names. So like I said, I had this book for about a year, and then it wasn't until my brother asked me, he's like, "Hey, have you ever read this?" And I was like, "No, but I have it." And he told me how good it was, and I was like, okay, that was kind of like the push to make me read it. So I'm glad I did. I feel like it kind of makes you stop and think about things, like why things are the way they are, or what other information don't we know about things that either they're not telling us or that they don't know about. So I thought it was an interesting perspective. I think also someone that might like it is someone that likes maybe like conspiracy theories. I wouldn't quite say it's like a conspiracy theory, but it's just a different perspective and a different way of looking at things. So, yep. So that's the book. I'm curious if you've read it. Let me know. Leave a comment. And don't forget to like and subscribe. All right. I'll see you next time.